North American Legacy Champs recap and recovery.
Next on Eternal Durdles. Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Durdle Maniacs. If you want to be a Durdle Maniac, go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, are you dead? Are you still alive? Did you make it?
I feel like I had an entire weekend in Pittsburgh.
Dude, not only did I play Control through all 9 rounds on day 1 and then play a bunch of challenges before and after, but then the next day, once I got back after a delayed flight, I went to Game Story and played the local.
You are committed. A madman, Phil.
We are committed to the bit.
I'll say this. You know, you spent the day, the next day recovering by playing Magic. I spent the next day recovering by securing us a bunch of really sick interviews that we're going to have in the next week or so.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
We both did work.
It was very cool to see everybody at Eternal Weekend. I mean, what an event, man! Like that stuff was awesome. Like Melee casually breaking down in the middle of the tournament as per usual.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a major legacy event.
It wouldn't be a big event if Melee didn't just crap the bed.
If Melee didn't just outright fail, it would just we wouldn't have it wouldn't be considered a true legacy classic.
Yeah.
So we're gonna cover our round by rounds. You know, we'll go through real quick on that, and then you know, maybe we'll give it a good little deep dive on the top 8 if there's time for that. If not, we also will have a nice little featured episode coming up with the North American Legacy Champion.
Yes.
So
we've got TK coming in pretty soon on the cast, and then we have another interview with Nick from the top 8, which we're gonna splice a couple of interviews that I did during the show into this episode. So in between rounds, you'll just get a interview that I've done during the day on during the Legacy Champs, and then. Also, we have a Infect Symposium coming up with Fenris Cloud and Michael, who came in 19th place with Infect from Eternal Weekend North America. So we've got a lot of cool episodes coming up. So if you're not subscribed, this is a great time to subscribe. If you're a Patreon supporter, thank you. If you're not a Patreon supporter, maybe now's the time to look into becoming a Patreon supporter. We're doing a lot of interviews. We're getting a lot of stuff going for the next year, and I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in store. So now's the best time to support us.
And for everybody who does, shout out to everyone who came out to us at Eternal Weekend. I'm always, it's still a weird experience
surreal.
when somebody comes.
It's so surreal.
You know, I do not consider us Magic famous by any means, but when somebody just would recognize us by our voice, which is really cool. And then it's like, oh wait, are you that? Like there were a couple of rounds this weekend where I played Miracles. I had my trademark Thwart in my deck. And I was playing, and people were like, "Hey, man, your altar deck is really cool." I was like, "Thanks, man, I appreciate it." And then at one point, at any point where I would thwart them, they would go, "Oh, you're that Force of Phil." And then you could see that, and that was just so funny and such a good time. So it was a cool experience, and you know, we appreciate that our listeners are so passionate and so kind. That was really lovely to see, and the event was really, really fun. So
yeah, let's get into it. If anything has kind of solidified how important it was to make the switch over to video, it was the amount of people that walked up to us and were like, "Hey guys, thanks so much." People just were able to recognize us from like the internet and the fact that our video exists. I think we got a lot less of that when we were just an audio podcast. So
yeah, and also we should turn it around too. Thank you to all of you for listening.
Heck yeah. I mean, dude, that's that's the other thing, Phil, that really brought this home is we do a video, it gets, 200, 300, 400, maybe 3,000 views. But those are all just numbers on a website to me until I go to an event like this and I'm like, oh my God, I am actually entertaining people sometimes. To me, that's it's forgive the pun here, but it's magical.
Yeah, I usually navigate my space in being the stubborn miracle bro. So I always have considered myself the heel of just trying to counterbalance, lock you out, and then fate seal you and leave it on top. but then you see everybody at these cons and realize that you're a babyface, and you're like, oh wow, this feels what a turn. So
yeah. So let's talk about getting there first. I took the train from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. It was kind of a really nice, like, very chill thing. Dula from our Discord joined me on the train ride, so we got to play test on the way there, which was really helpful because I didn't have a ton of reps. I did like a couple of moto queues the week before, but I didn't have a ton of reps with the deck, so it helped me get a real feel for the deck.
And I just flew in early Thursday. I played some challenges to figure out my final numbers as I calibrated. I actually moved off of Beanstalk and towards an Esper build of Miracles to play Drawn in the Lock, because what I found in my testing leading up to the event was that the version of Miracles that I was playing with Beanstalk was really reliant on Terminus having text. Yeah. And in the matchups where Terminus didn't have text, it significantly downgraded the power level of my up the Beanstalks, because it meant that I couldn't really convert card advantage in the same way as the decks that can just cycle their leyline bindings. So I moved towards black. I played a bunch of Drown on the Locks, which were sweet, and they worked out exactly like I wanted them to. I played Orcish Bowmaster for the first time, and we're going to get into that. Holy shit, what a horrible, disgusting, unfun play pattern Bowmaster on Bowmaster mirrors are. I'm never casting that card again. That was what an awful experience that was. Not even like that it wasn't good. It was just like, oh my god, like these suck. Like this just is not fun, interesting, or whatever. It was just like, all right. Well, anyway, we'll get into it. But I moved over into black. I had otherwise all of the good blue-white cards that you'd expect with a black splash, a couple of fractures in the sideboard, and then Drawn in the Lock was really my main draw to black to give me the consistency of enough removal and counter magic for more open field than I expected. And luckily, across my tournament, I dodged initiative altogether.
Yeah, me too. Ironically, I didn't play any initiative and goblins, which I was really super, like, I'll only see those two decks like constantly on Moto right now. So I was expecting those to be decks I would see more often. Of course, I almost said I played Miracles. Of course, I played Infect. I modified the deck on Friday morning with Fenris Cloud, and we kind of came to a consensus on what the new deck looks like. So you'll be able to see my deck in the Moxfield list we have. Quick shout out to Moxfield.
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy, and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
And so, so we've got, let's start out by talking about our first round. Phil, you go first.
So I played against Grixis Delver in the opening round. I ended up losing it 2-1, and this was the first moment that I realized, like, first off, losing your first round in an event like this where you can't afford to take your second loss, it just removed any tension for the rest of the day. Knowing that you were just like losing round one effectively meant that you were auto dead for top 8. I mean, you would have to go on an insane run after you lose your first round. So the tension was gone. But really what I recognized after round one was the splash that I chose to make, regardless of what it is, was fairly punishing. I realized that, like, from the first round, I was like, I would have liked to have been a little bit cleaner on my mana base and move away from a main board splash. I should have stayed a clean 2 colors with a splash for sideboard cards. I think that would have been better. It just would have made my mana a lot smoother, and I recognized that in round one pretty handily. But I lost that one to Grixis Delver.
My first round was against lands. Game one, I just got the old combo going. You know, I did the 1-2 punch. I think I won on like turn 3. And my opponent was relatively new to Legacy, and this was his first big event. So I think he had some butterflies. In game 2, he ended up beating me with a Merit Lage. Just made a Merit Lage off of a Reclaimer and got me. Game 3, he swords. Somehow I ended up at 21 life. I think he swords one of my guys. And I had a Bladed Agent in play, and he had an Elvish Reclaimer, and I saw the line. I was like, dude's going to make another Merit Lage and attack me. And I was just like praying that he would assume that, like, he wanted to attack me with the 20/20, but not the Elvish Reclaimer. And that's what happened. So I lucked out there, and I came back with the crackback for the win. So really, I didn't deserve that first win, but I'll take it.
We take those, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go to a quick interview. This is from in between round 3. Now we have David Marchasy, known clown card player. 8cast, right, today? Clowncast. That's great. How are you doing so far?
Not great, Zach. I'm
Not
2-2.
great?
I'm dead.
Ooh. You're not dead yet. You could. Something crazy could happen.
I'm not dead for prizing. I am definitely dead for top 8.
Dead for top 8. Yeah, of course. What have you seen so far?
Round 1, I beat the mirror, thanks to Clown Car.
Nice.
2, I lost to Reanimator. 3, I queued into the only Strifo pile player in the building.
Was it Strifo?
It was not Strifo. But
had to ask.
I don't know how to beat that matchup. And then 4, I went against Red White Initiative, and I won that.
Nice. So what do you think about 8cast right now? You still 100% on it?
No, I'm still a big fan of 8cast. I think overall, in terms of matchup spread, I think this deck is still pretty well positioned, but obviously there's such a wide variety of artifact hate that it can be difficult to play around, especially in an 11-round tournament.
Gotta hate Meltdown.
So I think the deck is still doing well, and it's maybe one new printed card away from returning to its gloriness of being busted. Pre-Bow Master meta.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, good luck on that. You're going to keep playing, right?
I'm going to keep playing.
Awesome. Good luck on the rest of the rounds. So back from that, we're going to round 2. Phil, what was your round 2 like?
So I played against 5-color control, up the Beanstalk, everything that you expect from 5-color. My understanding from, let me just double check. I mean, the games are pretty extensive. I'm just double checking to see if it's like the classic 5-color that you expect with like a colored pip of every color. A couple of Planeswalkers between Narset and Teferi. He was on 3 Orcish Bowmasters and 3 Uro, 1 Triumph, but otherwise he was on the standard Up the Beanstalk package. He did have 2 4th Aerolingus, so he was on the full 5 colors. And this was a matchup where my choice of counterbalance versus their Up the Beanstalks really came into play. So something that I learned in my testing as I was playing Up the Beanstalk and going against the other control matchups was, I know there was an episode where we discussed how Up the Beanstalk mirrors come down to exactly however many Up the Beanstalks you have. So if you have more Up the Beanstalks than your opponent, you're winning. And then if you're at Up the Beanstalk parity, then it's just about who has more Force of Wills. And those are really the only 2 axes that ever really matter when it comes down to those matchups. Now, there are some mirror breakers that I discovered, which is, my inability to let go of counterbalance. And counterbalance is a mirror breaker in that it can a counterbalance can keep up with Up the Beanstalk, in that you can convert a ton of cards off Up the Beanstalk, but if you can't actually resolve any of the stuff that you cast, then there's parity to be had. So I realized that when I had a counterbalance on the table against an Up the Beanstalk or against a pair of Up the Beanstalks, that one, a lot of the stuff that they are going to cast to convert Up the Beanstalk cards are reactive, and that's something that I had discovered in my testing of Up the Beanstalk, right? Like your Leyline Bindings, your Termini, your Force of Wills, like for the most part, those are reactive cards. Leyline Binding can just be cycled, but for the most part, they're reactive. And so when I was playing with a counterbalance, I recognized that I control the narrative now of that game. And so navigating to positions where I would just get a counterbalance versus an Up the Beanstalk, it let me really dance around what they wanted to do, because for the most part, aside from Up the Beanstalk, the deck is sorcery speed and clunky between Uro and the Planeswalkers and Lorien Revealed and 4th Aerolingus. Like, there isn't really much flexibility with that deck, which is why I never wanted to play it. But everything is really powerful. So there's a lot of tension, but I realized that if I can just sit behind and proactively dance with my counterbalance, that I can get favorable in the matchup. And then on top of that, I also had a pair of very, very fortunate blind flips on 3 drops that closed the deal for me. But it really was that was the first round that I saw a progression of counterbalance is really, really still very powerful against a good portion of the meta that's not Ancient Tomb. And that came to fruition in round 2, and I got a 2-1.
Nice. So I played against Jim S., who I think is one of Nick Koss's partners in the in Card Titan. And he was on what it says he's on is 10 rack, but it was just Beanstalk. It was like bug Beanstalk or 4-color Beanstalk. I don't know what 10 rack means. So anyhow, this was a 60 card Beanstalk deck, and you know what's really good against the Beanstalk decks, Phil?
Legolas's quick reflexes.
Well, of course, Legolas's quick reflexes is very good. I actually only resolved it in game 1 of round 1, and I never needed it for the rest of the tournament. Either lost too quickly or won too quickly for it to matter, or my opponent never reacted to what I was doing. But you know what's even better is so much of the Beanstalk decks. The reaction to these decks is playing Leyline Binding, and Inkmoth Nexus just don't care.
Yeah, that is
non-land,
true.
You know?
Yeah,
and so many times, I think in the first game, I just like had a soul read on my opponent, and I think I either turn 2 or turn 3'd him. When I realized that like the best thing he could be doing here was getting an Inkmoth Nexus, and then in game 2. I just realized that like the only thing he could possibly have against me was a ley line, and I didn't see any Orcish Bowmasters. His deck was playing Orcish Bowmasters, but I didn't see any. And I just went for it and got paid off. There were 2 pretty quick games. In fact, that's kind of the theme of my tournament, was that I played very quick games, and my matches were done well before. I was like the first person to stand up a lot of times.
As is the case with Infect, right?
Yeah, and that's that is the beauty of playing a combo deck like that at the tournament. You either win fast or you lose fast, and then you have time to eat, you have time to walk around. But yeah, we'll do another. I'll show you another interview I did. I'm not doing that. Okay, we're here with Eric Verkowski. Obviously on Doomsday, right?
Obviously, it hasn't always been obvious, but apparently at this point it is.
It seems pretty obvious at this tournament. There's a lot of Doomsday players today, huh?
I'm also dressed in black and blue, so like it would be totally off-brand for me to be
showing up
on lands.
in your finest demeanor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I wear now.
What have you played so far? Actually, what's your record?
I'm 4-0.
4-0.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't feel like my matchup luck was great until round 4. I'll get to that. I started off against Red White Initiative, immediately lost my first game, had to kind of like mentally rally. Then I played against Rhinos.
Okay.
Then I played against Sticker Goblins. So I was in the mono Simian Spirit Guide bracket. And I managed to navigate through all those, and then I got Yorian Death and Taxes, and it was not close.
Oh yeah, it doesn't seem like
not
it
good
would
for
be.
them.
Yeah. What are they going to ley line something?
Yeah, I mean they have tools, right? But like, they can't interact on the stack. Like sometimes they have Deafening Silence after board. Spirit of the Labyrinth slows me down a little bit. Land disruption, but
I feel like even if they have Deafening Silence, like if you can get to cast Doomsday, right?
Yeah,
you can just wait 5 turns, or you can cycle your way through it, right? Yeah, those
are not spells.
Yeah.
It's a little bit trickier against Spirit of the Labyrinth, but a classic Doomsday pile against Death and Taxes is fetches. So you just draw a couple of fetches and then fetch the lands out of your deck, and they're like draws.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And because they have such heavy land disruption, like that's always a good plan. I want to say that in that game, in game 2, I cast Doomsday off of LED. So there's a bingo card moment for you.
Yeah, that's wild, man. How did you even do that?
So I brainstormed, and I had Doomsday in hand already, and I drew like land, LED. I was looking for fast mana.
Yeah.
And I found almost enough, but I was able to put the Doomsday on top, play out another fetch, a pedal, the LED, and then you cycle hold priority.
Yeah. I got
empty-handed.
You now. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
And that makes it easy. He had nothing on board. And so I could just build a pile with like Oracle, one cycler, a couple of fetches. When he passes back, the game is wrapped up.
So 4-0, you're on the hunt right now.
I am. I'm hoping to top 128. That would be
amazing. Walking home with something, right?
Something. Yeah.
I'm 3-1 right now, so I still have hope.
So I have hope that I can keep dodging this matchup. I don't have to play Infect. It seems like maybe it would be okay for Doomsday because I don't care about my life total.
Yeah.
But you have a fast combo.
Man, I will attack you with a Noble Hierarch though.
I know you have to watch that.
I'll get you.
You have to watch the end of turn fetch for Dryad Arbor and then hit you with a Noble Hierarch up. Arbor? Do you have Arbor?
I did not play Arbor this. I was close. So I sat around with Fenris Cloud yesterday, and we really just went over the whole deck and I made some upgrades in terms of removing a couple lands, adding Lauren Reveal to the deck, so ups the blue count. So we have Force of Wills now that are live much more often. I cut a Ponder through another Lauren Revealed in. So now we've got 3 of those. We've upped the blue count by 2, basically. And then I pulled the classic Phil Bleckman ABC deck building, and I was like, if I wanted crop rotation, right? So if A, I want crop rotation, then B, I probably want Dryad Arbor. Then C, I probably want Green Sun Zenith and that package, right?
All right.
But we talked it through, and we came to the conclusion that that's old tech. Green Sun Zenith is old tech, and it's not going to do us any good. And we're often going to lose the matches where getting out like a Corruptor is going to matter, because it's 4 mana to get out of Corruptor, and you've probably already lost by then. So we took that out and just focused on the sideboard from there.
So no crop rotations at all.
2 crop rotations, 1 main, 1 on the board, but we're not playing Green Suns at all.
Okay. And what's the package with the crop rotation?
So
other
crop
than obvious
rotation
Inkmoth?
Is purely for Inkmoth to get it out, but then we have a Bajuka Bog in the board too. And we threw in a Wasteland because we've already got the Lauren Revealed, so we can throw in a Wasteland as an extra hedge for that. And it's coming in handy. I played against lands in the first round.
And that could be tough.
Came in use, And in my last round, I played against Rug Cascade, and he went turn 0 on my upkeep, cast Cascade. Right?
Yes, as they do.
I countered it, but his next play, and I played my fetch and said pass, and he played his Wasteland. He only had 2 cards left in his hand.
Yep.
So I'm like, this is great. I draw Wasteland. I Wasteland his Wasteland. He Wastelands my fetch. I fetch. Ponder,
do that dance.
And then I got there. But it was nice to have the Wasteland as like another time walk situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And as a 1-of, it's kind of free, especially if the crop rotation is generally for your combo.
Yeah. Well, good luck on the rest of the day, man.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll check in again later on.
I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Zach.
And let's talk about round 3. Phil, what was your round 3 like?
So round 3 was the first one where I recognized that it wasn't a recognition. It was more that I went 2-1 against. I lost 2-1 against Mono Black Helm. But game 3, there was a pivotal point that was on me. So I consider round 3 a punt on my part. I had my opponent. I had a cantrip on 1, and I was going to counterbalance on 2, and I could stack either a 3 or a 2 on top. And my opponent on turn 1 played Ancient Tomb and cast Chalice. So I was like, okay, in response, Brainstorm, and now I can play this counterbalance on 2, and I can stack either a 3 or a 2 on top. And I sort of got baited into the Ancient Tomb, and I left the 3 on top.
I would have gone with 3 myself.
But then what happened, and it just did, and it's one of those things where it's like maybe I needed more reps against the deck. What happened on turn 2 was they played an Urborg and then played a Dauthi Voidwalker. Oof. And now I'm stuck under this Chalice that is blanking 3 cards in my hand, and I'm getting beat down by this card that I could have just gotten a free counter on had I thought for a little bit longer than I did. Yeah. I got baited by that Ancient Tomb line, and I think that if I had just thought for a second...
that was the right line, honestly, Phil. How could you know that they were going to play Urborg into... Ancient Tomb, come on.
Well, I think it's actually reasonable considering that I'm the control deck and I need to understand what the meta actually looks like. And It's not like I had seen anything from this Mono Black Helm opponent that would have suggested that they were doing anything
with threes. Different. Yeah, anything
they
with
were doing
threes.
Anything. There's nothing that presented to me that I should move away from what I know stock more or less. Mono Black Helm.
What is he going to do? Main phase a opposition agent against you at best? There's no other 3-drops really that deck plays, right?
And at that early in the game, I think I'm mostly afraid of Dauthi Voidwalker and Orcus Bowmasters than anything else.
I think you're right,
Those are the cheap early clocks. So I could have stacked a 2 on top, countered the Dauthi Voidwalker, and then had 3 underneath if there was a follow-up opposition agent. And I stacked it the other way. Had I stacked it, had I just thought for a little bit longer, considering what the actual threats would have been out of that deck, even though there was an Ancient Tomb, I just didn't think about Urborg at all. In my considerations when I was debating between a 2 or 3, I just didn't consider Urborg in the slightest. And that's on me. That's my own punt. I could have dodged that. And had I countered as Dauthi Voidwalker, it would have given me access to my graveyard, which then would have paired well as I hit my land drops with my Mystic Sanctuary package, in which case my cantrips being shut off by the Chalice until I can draw a Prismatic Ending wouldn't have been as punishing. So the fact that he had the Chalice to turn off my cantrips and the Dauthi Voidwalker, which I could have countered, turning off my graveyard so my Mystic Sanctuary is off, means that I'm effectively locked out until I naturally drew a Prismatic Ending. where I would have had way more leverage and a clear board had I just stacked it the other way. So round 3, I call it a punt on my end. It was a tight match, but it was one where I had agency over my loss.
Yeah. For me, round 3 was tough, man. I played against Mono Red Painter, and I knew what I was up against when he played his second land. So I saw a red source after Urza Saga, and I was like, okay, I have to just beat this guy before he beats me. And both games were just here's the win. Can you stop me? And the answer was no both times. The second game I mulled to 5 against him, and still just didn't have anything that looked enticing enough to win with. I think I kept I had 2 non-land openers, and I just wanted anything to play the game of Magic with in the second one. So I just didn't have any reactions to anything he was doing, and I think I lost on turn 2 to Painter with in the second game. So it was 0-2 for me in that one. I had no chance against that deck. So let's go to another interview. Okay, we've got Matthew. Matthew, what are you on today?
I'm on Doomsday.
Doomsday.
Yep.
Doomsday. I've seen a lot of Doomsday in the room, actually, right?
Yeah, it's definitely gone up. I haven't seen the deck too much in paper before now, but it's definitely gone up a lot.
Wow. What did you play so far? What's your record?
2-2.
2-2. Okay. What have you played so far?
I played against 8cast, Show and Tell, Omnitel, and Red White Painter.
Okay. What did you win against?
I won against Sneak and Show and 8cast.
That makes sense. Those are decks that you can prey on for sure. And then, sorry, you lost to which two?
I lost to Omni Show and to Red White Painter.
Oh, you think that Omni Show would be a really good matchup? They had the forces?
They had the forces and the Veils this summer, which are pretty rough.
Are you going to keep playing on?
Oh, yeah. Definitely playing all the way.
Awesome. Matthew, thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
You as well.
And let's talk about round 4. Phil, what was your round 4?
My round 4 opponent was on Sultai Beanstalk. So
Okay.
he was on a 3-color Beanstalk deck with like Murderous Cut and Leovold and Orcish Bowmasters and Murktide Regent. Fairly a slightly more aggressive take on it. Like it wasn't full Beanstalk control. It was much more in the mid-range space that was leveraging up the Beanstalk alongside Murktide Regent and Murderous Cut. And this was a matchup where the leverage point of me getting to control the game of Counterbalance versus Up the Beanstalk really came to fruition. He, in game 1, had 2 Up the Beanstalks to my Counterbalance, and I won that game.
Okay.
Now, part of that is that they don't have access to white. And so not having Leyline bindings in game 1 meant that typically in games 1, if I have a Counterbalance, the way that I protect it is I can put Terminus on top to counter Leyline binding.
I see.
But without access to white, it makes it so that the way that they remove my Counterbalance is through things like Witherbloom Command and stacking a 2 on top, which are cards that I actively want in the matchup, things like Drown on the Lock and Predict, is a lot easier to manage.
Pretty common,
A, because I have more 2-drops, and B, because those are cards that I actively want to put back on top with Mystic Sanctuary anyway. So it becomes a lot easier to protect the Counterbalance in this particular build. But it was another example of my 1 Counterbalance with the shell around it beat their 2 active Up the Beanstalks, even though they were a more proactive Beanstalk deck with Murktide Regent and can convert more cards. The fun part about this matchup, where I ended up conceding after we were in time. So technically it was a draw, but it was a draw because we spent a lot of time like joking around and having a good time because we both knew that we were dead at this point in the event. And so there was a lot more casual back and forth and talk. And, had we been a little bit more aggressive in our clock management, if we were still both considering, the fact that we were live for a tournament,
trying to win.
I don't think we would have gotten there. What ultimately ended up happening, and a really memorable play where I got a picture of him doing all this stuff, and this is why we went to time, is he had a Leovold on the table. I have a Counterbalance. He casts a Murktide Regent. Now, I don't have any 7-drops in my deck, but I do want to flip my Counterbalance because I have a Predict in hand. So I know the top card of my deck when he casts the Murktide Regent. It's not a 7-drop, and it's also not a card that I want to draw. So I fetch, and I have a Predict in hand. Now, I'm going to reveal the top card, and it's not a card that I want to draw. I'm going to predict it away. I'm only going to draw 1 card because he had an active Leovold, but it's on his turn, which is still okay.
Mm-hmm.
But after I fetch, and I say, okay, man, give me a good cut, because he doesn't know that I don't have 7-drops. I said, give me a good cut. And he's like, don't ask me to do that, man. You're just going to make me cut you to a Terminus. And I was like, hey, man, you're putting it out there, not me. and then I blind flip and hit the Terminus. So as Murktide resolves, we have an amazing, like a great time. We're laughing, we're joking around about how like this awesome moment of like him manifesting the Terminus to the top of the deck is great, and we take pictures and we're doing the whole shtick, and it was a really good time.
Yeah.
And I Terminus his board. That's where it ends up becoming. We're at parity, but I guess we're not at parity. We're on an empty board. He's got cards but no threats. I have an active counterbalance with a predict in hand. And even though my life total is low, his only real outs that he's drawing to are pretty much exactly Bowmaster, and I have control of the game, and I'm drawing to like my Entreat the Angels.
Yeah.
So if given infinite time, there's argument that it's going to go either way. I think I'm favored in that position because I have the counterbalance.
Yeah.
But ultimately what happened is because we were both dead at that point, we were in the 1-2 bracket, that I was like, hey, man, are you going to play it out? Like, are you thinking about going deeper into the event and thinking that, you want to go on a streak? Because I was thinking I'm going to, stop here, go get food with whoever else. But everybody that I was talking to was still live afterwards.
Very live.
But I didn't know that during the match. And so rather than take the draw, he wanted to still play. He knew he was going to play the entire day. So I just scooped to him after that. But it was a really tight game. And it was an example of, I think, if I had my druthers, I would have gotten that last game because I had the counterbalance and I had literal miracled that Terminus.
Yeah.
Which was, but it was such an awesome moment. I got pictures of it, and that's also the dopamine hits when that happens. That's why I can't let go of miracles, man.
Yeah,
because moments like that are just so awesome.
Yeah,
the blind hits on 3
when the
earlier in round
hits,
2,
man. Yeah,
like when the variance, like don't get me wrong, when the variance goes against you and your counterbalance just was a mulligan and never converts anything, sucks. But like when it is just magical in those moments, oh man, the dopamine hits harder than anything else, and I can't let it go. So it was a 2-1 because I conceded because I was dead.
So I played against Ian, who was on Team of Rhinos, and this is a deck that I think is a really good matchup for me as an Infect player, because all I have to do is counter one spell and maybe have counterspell backup, right? Like, so I got the first game. I think I let him resolve the Rhinos after I had a Blighted Agent on the board, and then I just swung in and killed him on the next turn. The next game he got Rhinos, and I got put in a weird situation where I had 2 guys attacking him, two Blighted Agents attacking him, and he was at no poison. And I had in my hand 2 Invigorates and a Berserk, and I'm like, he's gonna have to do a lot to win this match, because I'm swinging in. He's gonna need 2 ways to stop me, right? And even that's not good enough because I think I had a Force of Will in my hand. So I had blue card Force of Will, Invigorate, Berserk, right? So even if he counterspells a guy or kills a guy, or counterspells an Invigorate or kills a guy, I just have the other plan. And if he doesn't, I don't even have to use my Berserk, right? So I swing in, and I'm like, okay, I'll Invigorate my Bladed Agent. And he's like, okay. And I was like, I'll Invigorate this other Bladed Agent. And he goes, I'm going to cast Fire. And I think he cast Fire in response to my first Invigorate. So he pinged both of my Bladed Agents. And I'm like, ugh. That is not what I wanted to have happen, because now I have to save the other one. Okay, I'll Invigorate this one. And he's like, okay, I'll counterspell that. I counterspell, and then he comes back with another removal spell, and I'm like, I guess I'm dead. He got me. Like, he had three ways to stop me that game, so there wasn't much I could do there. But I was like, I in my head, I was like, there's no way I'm losing this game. So we go into the next game. He mulls to 5. I keep a 7, and a 7 that looks pretty good. I've got like the turn 2 kill, and I'm like, yeah, this is it, man. I'll just take this. And so he goes, during your upkeep, I have effects. I'm like, what? Like what? Do you have a ley line or something like that? He goes, nope. Simian Spirit Guide, Elvish Spirit Guide, Simian Spirit Guide. Cast, Outburst. And I'm like, okay, I have like a Force of Will in my hand. So I'm like, I don't know. Like, he's got 1 card left in his hand. I'm like, this isn't going to work out for him. So he goes for it. I counter it. And he's like, okay. So I followed up with a guy he drew a card and like actually he had a land, so he like was able to kill my guy somehow. So we both kind of jockeyed for a little bit, trying to figure out how to win. But I kept him off of 3 mana, so he only ever had like 2 cards in his hand. I played a fetch, he played a wasteland. I drew a wasteland, hit his wasteland. Of course, he tried to wasteland my fetch. I fetched, and then eventually I got a Blighted Agent out, and it was just like doing 2 a turn and like keeping him off of 3 mana. And I eventually just got there when he just couldn't draw anything else. But like that would have been scary had I not had a Force of Will in my hand. I didn't model a Force of Will or anything. I just had one. I was like, this is a fine hand.
Infect the control deck.
Yeah, well, that is the beauty of Infect, Phil, is that you still have that fun police aspect to your deck. It's like when I switched from Rogue Delver to Infect, I wanted a deck that could fight against combo decks, but was in itself a combo deck that would be able to win fast against decks that put a clock on you. So that was a perfect encapsulation of that moment where I stopped a combo deck and then was the combo deck as well.
Yeah, dude, you're still a Force Days deck.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's go to another interview.
Okay, we're here in round 4 with Claudio. Claudio, what are you playing?
I'm playing Initiative today, Boris Initiative.
Okay. How you doing so far?
2-2.
All right.
I lost the matchup that I had to win, ideally versus Delver, but he top decked like a Drake. And I mean, I was not lucky enough, I guess. Beside that, it's going well.
Cool. What have you played so far?
I played Initiative. I played Crushing Footfalls, which is my other loss.
Okay.
Then I won versus Death in Texas, and I won the Mirror.
Okay. Well, you're still live for top 128, so you're going to keep playing, right?
Yes, I'm gonna. I'm here to have fun. I'm gonna keep playing regardless of my results, and that's it.
That's what we love to hear. All right, man. Well, good luck on the rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, so my next round was against Dale, who was on Mono Red Prison. And let me tell you, there's not a whole lot for me to say there. I won 1, he won 2, and the ones that Dale won were either I got locked under a Trinisphere, or I got locked under a Blood Moon. Even in game 3, I looked at my hand after mulling I mulled to 5, and I was like, I'm not mulling again. Like, I'm not going to 4. But I had Elf, Invigorate, Berserk, Force, and blue card, but no land. And I'm like, well, this sucks, but like I can't go lower. So I kept it. And my opponent started off. He played a land and said go, and I was like, oh crap, he doesn't have like a turn 1 Blood Moon against me. Amazing. So I draw. I get a Tropical Island. I play my Glistener Elf, and I say go. He dead and gone's my Glistener Elf, and I'm like, all right, I have to pitch my Force of Will for that. But I still got the kill in my hand. And he untaps, plays a Trinisphere. And I'm like, okay, I guess I lose. And
lost.
I never got to a third land. But like he eventually he got that like the Buccaneer Goblin that like can like toss creatures and artifacts at people.
Bombardier, yeah.
Yeah, Bombardier, that's what it is. And so eventually I just was locked out of the game because I couldn't keep a creature on the board. So kind of is what it is.
I'm hoping that we can get the community to start calling it Bombardier.
Bombardier.
I like the little French inflection. So in my round 5, I played against Cephalid Breakfast. Now, this is actually a matchup where I feel as though I don't get the natural advantage that I have as the Miracle Bro of them having dead removal in their hands. They're a deck that doesn't play Source of Plowshares in the main. Typically, they play it in the board. Usually in game 1s, I find that I get the natural advantage of your removal being blank, which means that if I can get a counterbalance to like stymie any brainstorms to help fix that hand, that there's just a bunch of natural dead draws that leverage me in game 1, and then I get to try and leverage that further in game 2 when I can bring in like triumphs and stuff. But not against Breakfast. So Breakfast is, I find, to be a pretty difficult matchup because they are just more, not only do they have a really condensed combo that also has Teferi, which is the bane of my existence, but they also have what's the silence? The
Orm's Chant.
Orm's Chant. They also have Orm's Chant and So they have Orange Chant, which gets to potentially turn off my counterbalance if I don't have a 1. They have a Teferi, which locks out my entire hand, and it's really difficult. And it effectively means that I have to like unload my removal on Teferi beforehand anyway, and then they just get to kill me. They're an Urza Saga deck, and that's also really difficult.
Yeah.
So they just have all these tools and also don't fall into the natural advantage that I get to have at game 1s against other decks. So I wouldn't consider it a favorable matchup, but I do know how to pilot against it, even though I don't think it's good. Now, this is was a fun game where game 1, I have a counterbalance, I establish a counterbalance. They have a Teferi, or they stick a Teferi, I force, they force back. Okay, great. They have a Teferi that sucks for me. So I can't really interact on the stack, obviously, but I can still interact with counterbalance and Mystic Sanctuary because I can fetch in response, and Mystic Sanctuary to still counter stuff. What happens is they go plus on the Teferi on turn 1 because they're not quite sure what I'm doing, right? Esper Miracles is not a known quantity.
Yeah.
So they're still a little unsure of what's going on. So they don't cash in the Teferi for a card just yet. They plus it first. I play a counterbalance. They're like, okay, bounce it down to 2. Draw the card. They get a Stoneforge Mystic, gets a Shuko. They play the Shuko. They're threatening a kill. I go on my turn, brainstorm, put a Jace on top, play the counterbalance. They go, play plus the Teferi up to 3, play the Cephalid Illusionist. I say resolves. They go, okay, sweet, because they thought that I was going to stack a 2 on top. They start comboing off. They're like, equip, trigger. And I'm like, yep, do your thing, man. And they're like, is it cool if I shortcut? I'm like, yep, do your thing, man. Shortcut all you like. They essentially flip their deck over, put all the Narcomoeba triggers on the stack. Everything is resolving, obviously. And then they go to cast Dread Return. And I reveal the Jace on top.
Rude.
And counter the Dread Return.
Yes.
And now they have no deck. They did not think that I would stack a 4-drop on top because they did not think that I had Jace the Mind Sculptor. Again, because what are they thinking that I even am?
What psychopath would play Jace the Mind Sculptor in this format?
In this format, right. So
really
I know that the way to beat the deck to not die to the combo is to have a 4 stacked on top of the deck with a counterbalance.
In that scenario, for sure, yeah.
In that scenario. Now, if they waited a turn, there was a little bit of nuance, right? If they put me on a 4-drop on top and waited a turn and have the Teferi on 3 when they untap, then things get interesting because if they let me draw, I get to play the Teferi, I get to play the Jace the Mind Sculptor, brainstorm, and potentially stack a 2 on top to counter the Cephalid Illusionist that would then come down the following turn. Yeah. If they played the Cephalid Illusionist and got it onto the board, but then didn't go off and pass the turn, then I get to Jace the Mind Sculptor with a land available to potentially swords their Cephalid Illusionist before they get to go off. So there was a bunch of nuance had they thought about a 4 on top, but they didn't. And so it was the interesting scenario where I beat both the combo with a Teferi on the table, which is a unique scenario. But again, it goes to show the power of counterbalance.
Yeah.
And then game 2 was just a nice, clean counterbalance. You never resolve a spell. Delightful for me. Take the win.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Well, let's do one more interview. All right. We're in round 6 of Eternal Weekend. We're here with my round 6 opponent, Duncan, who crushed me with Cradle Control. I did get one game with a turn 2 Glistener Elf Invigorate Berserk, which was pretty sick. But Duncan, what have you played so far today?
Right, so I started with Show and Tell. So I'm playing Cradle Control. It's like a mid-rangey green deck. It's like Elves if it's built to be Delver, and not bad against Bowmaster. Again, when I'm playing Show and Tell, the matchup's really bad, but I ended up squeaking it out. I mulled into Atraxa one of the games.
Nice.
And it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I got bodied game 1, and then game 3 we had a dirtily draw. I get natural order with Alex Sword Shepherd. We get him. I play against Delver twice, Delver variants. The matchup's really good. You're kind of built to crush them. You have 4 Endurances and you have 4 Reclaimers with or with your Kabog main. So you're really able to keep them from doing anything, get under them. I played against my 2 losses were Mono Red Painter, who we had really close games. I don't feel too bad about those games, but he the game 3 I get double furied into Saga Text. It's okay.
Fury seems pretty good against you, yeah.
It's pretty solid. My other loss was to Mono Red Stompy. We had really close games. I win this game if I'm on the play. By the way. And he goes, it was something he goes, turn 1 Bombardier, really good against me. And then he goes, Pitch Fury, throw it at you, steal 7, and then he goes Pyrokinesis. And I'm like, all right, man.
Yeah, whatever. You got me.
It's even like that sometimes, and you kind of got to take your L's with Cradle Control. It's you're really a matchup deck where you're trying to you're trying to spike like your matchup rounds, and those matchups aren't bad by any means. I haven't hit like Doomsday or anything, which is what you lose to, which I'm lucky for. And I played against Infect, which I have Plague Engineer on the board right now because
It
Delver,
was good. It was pretty good. Stopped me from playing anything else.
You name Phyrexian, it just like gets them. You get off the Narzen, and against Delver, you name Human, and it's questing Druid and all their 1-drops. And it's like uncounterable through Narzen. That wins the game a lot. So I've been really enjoying it.
Awesome. Well, you're 4-2, so you're still live for top 128, possibly for top 8 if something lucky happens. Anyhow, good luck on the rest of the day.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Yeah, have a good one.
And my round 6 opponent was on Cradle Control. So I went from bad matchup to really bad matchup. Cradle Control is just a bear for me. Between the Griefs, which are not great, the Scam package, into Grist, Bowmasters is not impossible for me to win against, but it's not great. And on top of that, also just having Fiend Artisan to go get Grist, to go get Bowmaster, like the whole deck is just built to stop me. And they're playing Snuff Out. It was a nightmare. That and amazing that I even won one game against Duncan, who was a complete gentleman the entire time, and really fun to play against. But man, I think what happened in the first game, the reason why I won the first game is I just went again on a soul read, and I realized that I think my opponent doesn't have anything because he tapped out, and I was like, I guess I'm just gonna go for it. And of course he didn't have anything, so I lucked out there. But the next 2 games he just stomped me. One thing I will say about that matchup is Bowmasters. I think a lot of people think Bowmasters is really a killer for Infect, and it's not great. Don't get me wrong, but because you have access to Invigorate, there were a couple games where I was like, cool, Bowmasters, I'll invigorate my Glistener Elf or whatever Blade Agent. I'll brainstorm, and they're like, okay, I'll shoot you. I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. And then I'm like, okay, cool, I drew the combo, I'll kill you. As long as you're sequencing properly and you're not playing into a Bowmaster, especially if it's just out there on the board, there's plenty that you can do to mitigate it in Infect.
Yeah, I mean, Orcish Bowmaster against you is effectively just damage-based removal, right?
Yeah, it's Infect it's 2 mana to get it into play, so it's soft to daze,
Yeah, and Infect is also historically always had to navigate around Lightning Bolt and stuff.
Yeah,
so,
it's better if you play Lightning Bolt than it is if you play Orcish Bowmasters, because I'm like, cool, you spent too much mana to do that. I'm gonna untap and kill you.
And Infector is also happy to play against damage-based removal versus something like Swords to Plowshares, where your pump effects can actually counter the damage-based removal, and that's more favorable because it means you have more outs to that kind of removal. So it's I think obviously more just incidentally more removal, right? Because Orcish Bowmasters is also a threat. So it's just an incidentally higher density of removal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Infect can't navigate.
I mean, in this scenario, in this deck, it is at its best because you're combining it with Hand Disruption, which means that you can remove my pump spells, leave me with Brainstorms, right? And then on top of that, you have Snuff Out, which means that my dazes are probably useless. Not to mention, you just have a tempo level there that I can't deal with, and the life loss doesn't even matter. I won 0 games with where I had killed my opponent with life. It was all Infect all day. So I think overall, all of my losses minus the I dropped out of the tournament at this point, so it's just going to be you for the rest of the tournament. But I want to give a quick encapsulation of what my tournament looked like and kind of what my takeaways were. I think that my build was good, but I think what I need to do. So I was playing a 1 Spell Pierce, and you can see the list. I think that Spell Pierce needs to become a basic forest, because I mulled a lot. I mulled to 5 4 times during this tournament, and it was just because, I don't have any lands. Oh, cool, I have Lorien Revealed, but I don't have a land to make it work. So I think I was just 1 land off in the deck. I think Lorien Revealed was a great addition to the deck, removing a couple lands to be able to play it, but I never used it to draw a card. It just used it to pitch to Force of Will or to go get a land, which I think was fine. but it's an awkward card in a deck where I definitely want a basic forest. But it's island cycling, and I certainly do not want generous Ent in the deck. Like I'm not gonna like I can't use that at all. So I can't use the the being able to pitch generous Ent to Force of Vigor. I guess is good, but it's not doing what I want it to do.
Yeah, I think also one thing to highlight too on your pivot over to Lorien Revealed is similar to like what people were doing in like Vintage with Urza Saga, where Urza Saga plus Lorien Revealed lets you get your colored source after playing it. Same thing with Inkmoth Nexus.
I got to play Inkmoth Nexus, and I added a Wasteland into the deck because of that.
Yeah, so like having the colorless sources be effectively ways to also turn on getting your colored sources to continue development is something that we didn't mention when you moved over to Lorien Revealed, but it is a highlight of like
it's very good.
It lets you play your Inkmoth Nexus on turn 1, knowing that you will be able to continue development without having to like cantrip. Or something.
Yeah, I did convert Lorien Revealed off Inkmoth Nexus a fair amount of times. It allowed me to keep a lot more hands, but like I said, there were times when I just drew. I had 3 separate mold of 5s where I saw no lands, shuffled, saw no lands, shuffled, and was like, okay, I'm keeping 5. I think that I a better build of this deck, I would have done much better on the day just by the virtue of me keeping hands. Like if I'd have kept a hand against my opponent in that prison match where I had a land, I would have won. I was a turn off from killing my opponents in most of my losses, which is saying something about the deck. I think the deck is super powerful, and I'm on it right now. Like this is my deck right now for a while, I think.
Well, also good thing to learn now, as like you recently moved into Infect again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you were getting more reps online, and then you got more reps here, and like recognizing these changes for your deck is also worthwhile because there's likely to be another significant legacy event in the first quarter of 2024 in your backyard. SEG Philly is going to have an event. Now they haven't released the schedule for that yet, but if there's a legacy 10K, it's going to be nice to have the adjusted deck list in the interim.
And Phil, let's not forget the Legacy Cup at MC Chicago.
That's right, and the Legacy Cup. So like, there's a couple of big events that are going to be coming up that having those adjustments is worthwhile. And then assuming that Karlov Murders at Karlov Manor, which is the set release in between now and then, doesn't do too much of a shakeup. I doubt that anything is really going to shake up Infect unless they give you a new busted pump spell that pushes him big and out. But like beyond that, I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to change your deck list. So figuring that stuff out now is worthwhile.
Yeah, I think I'll have a lot more to say about the deck in the Infect Symposium I'm doing with Michael and with Fenris Cloud. So be sure to tune in for that. But let's go to your round 6, Phil.
So my round 6 was against Grixis Delver. This is where I noticed that once I had done the math the night before on like how many losses you could take in order to actually make top 8, and the fact that it was 11 rounds, but it was a nearly 1,000-player tournament, and that's not a sufficient number of rounds for that number of players. So we figured out early on that if you take your second loss, you're just effectively dead, right? Yeah. Now taking your loss early, once I was like sort of checked out of knowing that I couldn't really cash the tournament, so to speak. I don't think I played nearly as tight as I was, even though I had a lot of these fun plays. And that showed up here in round 6, where in game 1, I just punted. I threw away a Drown in the Loch for effectively no reason. And so I just auto-scooped. I was like, I just punted this. I'm not interested in continuing this game. I effectively time-walked myself, right? Not worth it. Yeah. But then I won games 2 and 3. This was against Grixis Delver, because Triumph of St. Catherine is Nutter Butters against Grixis, or against Delver still. So the fact that I had Counterbalance plus Triumph of St. Catherine, like the deck is really well set up to fight against the Delver matchups. If I just had built my deck to be a little bit cleaner in terms of its mana base and its curve, I don't think I would have suffered the losses that I did to Delver. I think that like my style of control is I can never beat Cavern of Souls, but I feel like I'm extremely well set up to deal with Delver and all of its variations.
Yeah.
So
agree.
As I adjust my build, if I run into Delver a lot in future tournaments, I think that's going to be favorable for me. I'm happy to never run into Cavern of Souls, but round 6 felt pretty ABC. Punted round 1, boarded into Triumph and leveraged counterbalances in game 2 and 3. We danced back and forth, but ultimately I got there.
Let's go to the final interview I did for the day, which includes the one of the finalists, not finalists, but Nick, who made it into the top 8.
All right, we're here with Nick.
Yep.
Nick, you are. What's your record right now?
What round are we in?
We're in. This is round 9. Round 9.
7-1-1.
7-1-1. You were just at a feature match.
Yep. Yeah. Just beat Hatfield, who's on Paradoxical Outcome with Transmute Artifact, part I hadn't seen in literal years.
Whoa, Transmute Artifact.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. It's Transmute for the ring, it seems like. Mostly.
Transmute for the ring, not for what? Time Vault would be the card I would think.
That'd be a good one.
This is wrong format, right?
I would be dead.
Yeah.
I would have been dead a long time ago.
I'll take all the turns.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So what are you on?
I am on what I call 4-color garbage pile. It is, it's essentially, I don't like Delver. That doesn't flip. We have 22 instants of sorceries. I cut that a long time ago. I play Bowmasters and Druid, and that's it. You just go over the top.
You're out there seeking the beast and throwing bows. I got you, yeah.
It's really good to have both. It's really been strong.
I don't doubt it,
especially seek the beast into a Bowmaster.
So we're talking 4-color?
Yep.
4-color, we got not white.
No. Everything's white. Mana's pretty bad. I have 3 Volks, 2 Seas, 2 drops.
Okay.
I have lost access to red today.
Woo. Yeah.
It was okay.
Been there.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, I'm never casting a red spell again. My hand is Unholy Heat and Pyroblast. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh. But you've been slogging through, man. X1 and 1.
Yeah.
God damn. So you're still live for top 8?
I think so.
Holy
shit. I think so. I think I need to win out. I think I need to win out.
I think you better win
There's
out.
only two more rounds tomorrow.
Is it just 2 more rounds?
11 rounds. 7, yeah, okay. That's not too bad.
Rock and roll. Yeah,
That's easy. It's
then cut the top 8. Yeah, you can win 2 more rounds.
I think so. I think so. My goal was 128th place. Exactly 128th place.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think we're okay.
Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing good. So what was your loss?
Lands. I misplayed. I told myself not to do this anymore. I did it anyway. Do not wasteland lands with an open green. Don't do it.
Don't do it. They'll crop rotate every time. Every time.
Rotate in the tabernacle, you lose. It was so bad. It was such a misplay. I don't think it's a good matchup anyway. I don't feel too bad, but that was a stupid misplay. As soon as I did it, I was like, I've had these talks.
Yeah.
I've told myself this. I know this is wrong.
You live, you learn, you win 7 more rounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That sounds great.
It's been good.
Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Yes,
no more rounds
we're done today.
We're done today.
Which we need.
Good luck tomorrow.
Exhausting.
Yeah, I'm exhausted myself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck. That's all I can say is good luck. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Have a good one.
Tomorrow goes well. Have a good one.
All right. So round 7. At this point, I have dropped from the tournament. I entered a side event that started at 4:20, and I played against a Death and Taxes player. And I did fine. I won that round, but I feel like again it was one of those things where my opponent punted, and I was given a round. So I feel like asterisks on that win. Same thing with the round 1 win I had, where like those easily could have been losses if I played against somebody who was a little more savvy with their deck.
And I stayed in the main. I played all 9 rounds, even though I thought I was going to drop earlier in the day. But then because the people that I was rooming hotel with wise and getting dinner with and stuff, everybody was still playing. Most of them were still live. So I was like,
I want to say, Phil, giant mistake on my end by dropping from the tournament. I should have played it out because here we are. You still are talking about the tournament, and I'm talking about some side event I lost.
Well, also, like, it's good, too. Like, you were also moving back into Infect in a meaningful way, and getting the reps is significant if you have players that are still more or less taking the tournament serious, even though you're dead. I also think I should have done. I mean, I was having a good time, and I think that like there were points where I punted just because I wasn't as zoned in as I probably should have been. The thing is like, I mean, I guess there's no excuse for that. But I did recognize by this point in the tournament, I recognized where the flaws in my deck were.
Yeah.
So I already knew the changes that I wanted to make.
That's the thing about these big events. You can see where the wheels are falling off. Like, it's real easy.
Yeah. So, and like the fact that I was like running into the same potholes that I recognized already. So like when I made mistakes or my deck wasn't functioning in the way that I wanted it to, it was because of problems that I had already identified.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like learning anything new about the build that I had played or the adjustments that I had wanted to make, because it was pretty clear to me what adjustments needed to happen.
Yeah.
And so like in that regard, there wasn't really anything to be learned in terms of deck building until I could leave the tournament and change my deck list up for challenges and stuff, which I then did later. But in round 7, I played against Storm, and this was really an example where the Black Splash like leveraged pretty much to where this felt pretty much like a buy. Not in that like it wasn't still challenging, but I just felt like I was so over prepared to fight on the stack because
why was this, Phil?
I was playing 4 Drown in the Lock.
Okay,
I was
Drown
playing
in the Lock. Okay.
I wasn't playing 4. I was playing 3 Drown in the Lock. I had cut one before the tournament, but the fact that was the argument that I had made about why I had shifted to black instead of green, because when I was playing Up the Beanstalk, it really relied on Terminus having text, and when you play against combo, if you have all the white cards that don't have text, and then also Up the Beanstalk, which is too slow because, okay, you're tapping out, but it doesn't really leverage you in any meaningful way to protect you. Yes, it cantrips or whatever, but you're really relying on like your free counter magic at that point so they don't kill you. And they have Veil of Summer and, potentially Thought Season, whatever, to like clear the path. So I felt when I was playing Up the Beanstalk that when I was playing against Dark Ritual decks that I was extremely anemic. Even though you have this insane draw engine, the games are too short for you to leverage it.
Yeah.
And that's why I had moved away and audibled onto black, because I was like, what I really want is, when I was playing Up the Beanstalk, I noticed that, like, okay, you have like your Force of Wills and you have your Termini and your white cards, and then you have Beanstalk in the middle, but Beanstalk by itself doesn't actually salvage you anything unless the games are going to go long enough for you to leverage the card draw off of it. And so it exacerbated the draw the right half of your deck problem, where if you're going against Storm and you have Up the Beanstalks and white cards, then you're way more anemic and are just going to get buried.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas when I was moved over to black and I was playing Drown in the Lock filled the gap that the Up the Beanstalk didn't, which was, okay, now it doubles both as removal and counter magic, but it doubled down on the fact that I'm going to be soft to Ancient Tomb, because Drown in the Lock requires them to have stuff in the graveyard, and Ancient Tomb decks don't really put that much stuff in their graveyard.
Nah.
And even if they do, their curves are a lot higher, like stupidly higher. So if I'm on Drown in the Lock and Counterbalance in the main, I'm effectively conceding to anything Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, if I have a bunch
Doomsday.
of baubles in my yard, like, and I cast, Thought Cast, you're like, I cast, counter it.
And there is something to be said that, like, 8 cast is a little bit different because they do load themselves pretty heavily with Emeries.
Yeah.
But anything that's in the space of, like, if you are a non-Emery Ancient Tomb deck, those are the matchups I really don't want to see. I don't want to see Cavern of Souls, like, I definitely don't want to see Initiative. I just can't beat that deck. I don't want to necessarily Goblins because now that Goblins is mostly effectively just an aggressive show and tell style variant that happens to have Cavern of Souls, I don't necessarily want to run into that because I'm at the mercy of whether or not they draw their Cavern of Souls.
Yeah.
But if it's also like really advantageous for them to be on the play, and so it's exacerbated in that way too. So it's like, in that regard, I'm like hoping to dodge those decks. But we talked about that in an episode before the tournament, where it's like you have to assume that you're going to dodge, right? Yeah. And I did, right? Yeah. I for the most part did. And I mean, even though I was dead early, I did dodge those matchups that I didn't want to see.
It's a point that I definitely want to make at the end of this, where we go over like how good we did a dodge ball.
Yeah. So in this matchup against Storm, having access to Counterbalance, plus Drown in the Lock, plus Force of Will, plus Snapcaster, and then post-board I have like Flusters and stuff. Like, I'm extremely well set up to fight on the axis of stopping you from just blitzing all of your stuff in a turn. Yeah. And the fact that you're not putting any pressure on my life total and you're not waste landing my lands means that I'm going to get to develop as long as you don't kill me. And so having that much density meant that they never really got to string enough together because my walls were never down, because the build that I brought didn't ever put the shields down in that regard. And so in the same way that I don't want to ever run into Ancient Tomb in this event, I was happy to run into Storm because they are not beating me on the axes that I can't fight on, right? They are fighting in exactly the axes that I want to fight on, which is on the stack.
Yeah.
I want to fight on the stack. I have a lot of free counter magic. I have Counterbalance, which is really powerful against them to keep them from having Veil of Summer turns. So it's exactly the lane that I wanted to fight in. I did. And even though like the games there was some amount of back and forth where they tried to make moves to go off, I just had enough shields in the way that they couldn't actually break through. And Counterbalance, again, was a highlight there. But it was really the difference between, if those Drown in the Locks were up the Beanstalks, I'd probably lose this round.
Yeah. So my next round of the side event was against Claudio, who was on Mono Black Scam. We already saw the result of that because he was one of the people I interviewed. So what did you see, Phil?
In round 8, I played against Team or Delver. Now, this was an example, again, where I ran into what the pit holes of my deck were. This was also an unfortunate event where I cantrip, missed a land drop, cantripped again, missed the land drop. So it was very clear that was the access that they then needed to put all of their cantrips on. So the fact that I was exposed to wasteland, but then also my cantrips missed, unfortunate, and that's what happened. Then I could just jump into round 9 because the story is exactly the same.
Yeah,
the story is exactly the same. They're playing Death Shadow, but otherwise they have all the same tools that Delver does in terms of mana denial, and it was the exact same story for a second straight round where I cantripped, missed, cantripped again, missed, and the game effectively ended because I couldn't hit my third land drop. And the problem with that is that the way that my deck is structured with Mystic Sanctuary is the critical turn for me that I want to set up to where I feel invincible, more or less, is a counterbalance with a fetch available on 4 lands representing a Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah.
Because that means that I can convert countering your spell from my fetch, untap, have all the resources plus mana in the world, and that's where I feel unbeatable.
Yeah.
But if I never actually get to that position, it becomes really challenging for me. And if a deck can compound the fact that I miss a land drop on my own because my deck shits out, then I feel like it's really, really impossible for me to come back up unless I can naturally hit a Terminus and we play draw go for a little bit.
Yeah.
So rounds 8 and 9 were more or less similar stories. It was Temur Delver and then Death Shadow, but the stories of them were the same. Cantrip, miss on land drops, and then the game was over.
Yeah. So let's take a quick look at our pairings and see good or bad matchup. So I had lands, which I think was fine. Like because Legolas is quick reflexes, I think lands is like an okay matchup for me. So not neither good nor bad. Then I had 4-color control, like 4-color beans, which I think I'm good against. Red Painter, I'm bad against Blood Moon. I'm not great against combo decks that are ready to deal with combo decks. Team of Rhinos, I think I'm favored there. So I'm 2, 1, and a maybe. Mono Red Prison, I'm bad against, so 2, 2, and a maybe. And Cradle Control, so 2, 3, and a maybe. So I only had 2 good matchups, 3 bad matchups, and 1 maybe matchup.
On my side, I had Grixis Delver, which I would consider a good matchup if my deck was built correctly, because Counterbalance and Triumph are very good. 5-color control is a maybe, but I know how to navigate the matchup, so I would put the 5-color control decks or the 4-color control decks more so at a bit of parity. It also depends on if they are a deck that is splashing for Pyroblast, because if they don't have Pyroblast, then Counterbalance hits a lot harder. So depending on what they're doing there. This was on 5-color. They were splashing red, but I never saw a Pyroblast that I remember. So in that regard, I would consider it good, even if you are beanstalking. So I put that in the middle.
You can look at the deck and see if it has a Pyroblast in it.
Yeah. I just mean that like even if he did have Pyroblast, it never showed up in the match
Fair.
where it was
Too
meaningful.
favorable.
I'm looking at the deck list now, and they did not have Pyroblast
so definitely
anywhere in their
favorable.
sideboard. So I would consider that one. It's up in the air, but like I think that one's.
We'll put it like in the middle, but towards favorable.
That one's in the maybe, but I think there's a lot of play to that kind of matchup because Counterbalance allows you to keep up with Beanstalk.
Mm-hmm.
Round 3 is Mono Black Helm. I would consider this a bad matchup. They're an Ancient Tomb, Urza Saga, Chalice, Dauthi, Voidwalker deck. And a lot of that is going to be contingent on play draw because whether or not you get to get an early Urza Saga or if they were like on Grief, Dark Ritual, Hymn to Turox, like all of that, like a lot of that's really going to be dependent on play draw. So I would consider it a bad matchup.
Okay.
Round 4 is Sultai Control. I would consider this a good matchup if I know that you're not on Pyroblast and you're not on white cards to get rid of my counterbalance. I think we're going to be able to leverage. I'll play that. Cephalid Breakfast. I consider it not a good matchup, but Counterbalance is very good against them if they don't stick a Teferi on the table. So I would put that one in the middle. I think there's more play to that matchup if Teferi isn't involved.
Okay, so we'll have it as one in the middle. Okay.
Grixis Delver, I think that's a good matchup for me. Storm, I think that's a good matchup for me. Temur Delver, again, I think that's a good matchup for me. I would rather see Grixis than Delver. I would rather see Grixis than Delver because Temur has Seek the Beast, which is a card advantage engine, whereas Grixis has Orcish Bowmasters, which is just another creature. And the difference between being able to convert my Termini for multiple threats as opposed to you being able to recoup a bunch of cards after you get swept. So I think Temur is more difficult than Grixis, but I still consider it a good matchup because Counterbalance is just such a haymaker.
So Phil,
and then in round 10.
Oh, round 10?
Or round 9. Round 9, sorry. Round 9, I played against Death Shadow. I also think that's a good matchup. So for the most part, I think I had.
Phil, what's your excuse? You had 6 good matchups, 7 good matchups.
I don't have an excuse. My deck was misbuilt, and I recognized that pretty early on because I audibled. All of my testing was mostly with Beanstalk.
You caught me by surprise when I saw you in round 9 playing with black cards.
Yeah, and then I audibled without enough reps. I used the challenges the day 2 days before on Thursday and Friday to try and get in as many reps as I could to figure out the correct numbers. I don't think I figured out those correct numbers because my own choices of cards and the mana base that I had submitted led to at least 2.5 losses. Looking at it,
yeah.
And if we look at that matchup that I didn't concede, I was technically 4-4-1. But I would say at least 2.5 matches were my own fault on my own build, not anything that was done in game. And so if we look at it in that regard, if I go from 4-4-1 to 6-2-1, that's a very different outcome that could have been avoided had I just put in more time on the choices that I made. So no, there is no excuse. Full responsibility on my end. I could have had a better tournament considering that. I mean, granted, like if you're winning, you don't necessarily have these matchups. Like, the trajectory changes with every win or loss.
Of course.
But assuming that I ran into this, regardless of what my outcomes were in each matchup, this is a very nice tournament for me to run into. I never ran into Blood Moon. I never ran into Cavern of Souls.
I would have taken those matchups in a second.
Exactly the kind of field that I want to run into. So for the most part, like it's 100% on me, and that's okay.
I don't believe necessarily, but I don't think I made any major errors in play. I didn't see anything that like I walked away from the table going, "You idiot, dummy." Mostly I just didn't like, I had openers that were not great and had to mold down to a subpar amount of cards and, losing to Blood Moon, like that's, and that's what Fenris Cloud said, that like the deck does fold to Blood Moon right now. So I think for me, the biggest thing for me is to get more used to the deck. And like I said, I probably made some mistakes here and there, but nothing that I walked away from the table going like, "Oh, you dummy. Like, why did you do that?" So I think, for this, I kind of want to give myself a bit of a resolution. I want to do good. I want to have I want to play all the rounds next Eternal Weekend, but I want to do well. I want to look at next Eternal Weekend as sort of a proving ground for myself. And I'm going to be looking at other tournaments and playing a lot more actively. I re-upped my Moto account, so we'll be dropping some videos of me playing Moto poorly soon. But I think I'm kind of making a resolution for myself that I want to start really taking this seriously and come up with a good result.
Yeah, now that you're also in a position where you have a bit more stability back in your life.
Yeah, right? I have a job and stuff. Like, look at me.
It'll be a lot easier for you. Yeah, it'll be a lot easier for you to do that sort of thing. Whereas, like before, when you were trying to both simultaneously prep for Eternal Weekend and also get your stability back after an unfortunate layoff
and building the channel. Okay. The channel's built. It's like the channel's built now, so we can.
There's a bunch of things that you had going on that take precedent over one tournament.
Yeah,
and so next year should be a more stable year, and you can commit to figuring out the proper build and getting in the proper reps and being more prepared and having your sideboard mapping cleaner and getting in those higher stakes reps under you.
Yeah. Well, Phil, do you have anything else you want to add in?
I think the takeaway from this event for me was I remember when we had the topic of trusting the homework.
Yeah.
And I trusted the homework, but then I trusted the homework knowing that I should audible.
Yeah.
But then I didn't allow myself enough time to test that audible to then trust my homework again. So that's something
you
that
scrapped your science fair project and started a new science fair project with not enough time.
But the thing is there is something to be said that I think the trusting the homework part that we talked about, I executed well.
Yeah.
But the part that we didn't talk about is in the event that you have to, your homework is saying that you need to pivot. What do you then do when you pivot? And that's where I think it's like, okay, going into a next event, if I need to get that sense of is this working or is this not working sooner, and commit.
Yeah.
And committing to the build and then figuring out what that actually looks like a little bit further out. That way I don't run into this position where if I could go back again, I registered 2 Orcish Bowmasters in my deck. During the challenges, I was playtesting 3 Orcish Bowmaster. And I recognized that this felt anemic in my deck because I'm not pressuring the life total in the same way that Delver decks are.
Yeah,
and even
I think you would have been better off with like a Hull Breacher or something.
I think I would have just been better off further supporting the shell that my deck wanted to fight on, which was Counterbalance.
Yeah.
And if I could have gone back, what I would have swapped is the Orcish Bowmasters for just more portents.
Yeah.
I would have just shifted back to more of what that shell was. And had I had so, and I noticed that like the time that I had given myself in those 2 days of challenges before the main event, I was on that trajectory.
Yeah.
I started at 3 Orcish Bowmasters. I went down to 2 Orcish Bowmasters. And then while I was playing the main event, I recognized I don't want these Bowmasters in my deck at all. And had I had just a little bit more time, literally probably another day's worth of testing and challenges or, testing regardless, I probably would have gotten to that conclusion because it didn't take me long in the main event to recognize that.
Yeah.
It took me literally 2 rounds.
Yeah. And you were like, okay.
And and now I'm like, okay, now I'm stuck with this. But had I had gotten those 2 rounds just right before, I might have made that switch. And then that might have made the difference between going 4 and 5 to going 6 and 3, which is a wholly different outcome. That's potentially a top that gets me into cash, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really those subtle nuances. And I think that was really the thing that I learned, which was I trusted the homework, but then I wasn't prepared to deal with the pivot after trusting that homework. And going into the next thing, I need to do if you pivot, you need to pivot faster and commit to what you're going to do. So give yourself a deadline before a tournament where you're not going to audible on you may change a couple of slide board slots as you're figuring it out.
But you're not going
to. But I overhauled a lot. I went from green to black, and that changed both. It didn't necessarily change how the
play
deck
patterns
piloted
completely.
I wouldn't say it changed it completely, but it did change my matchup suite completely.
Yeah.
Right? The matchups that I'm really good against versus the matchups that I'm really bad against. There's some stuff that I'm obviously really bad against just because of the axis that they fight on, a la Initiative, Cavern of Souls.
Sure.
But then the matchups that I'm really good against, that also changes where I'm now I feel like I'm better set up against Delver. I feel like I'm better set up against Storm, but I'm going to be a lot softer to anything related to Ancient Tomb because I can't necessarily keep up on cards in the same way that, if they're Urza Sagaing and all this other stuff. So that's the lesson that I took away from this, which was still good, right? We had an eye going into the tournament, and I think the stuff that we found and talked about, I do think was correct. And I think afterwards, I just realized that there was an additional step that we didn't talk about, which was discovered, right? And that's why we play and that's why we learn. So ultimately, though, I would give myself C+, B- on the prep and execution. There was. I think our prep was slightly flawed, but on course. And I think my actual execution was fairly medium because of my my lack of time on the switches that I made.
Yeah. I have 2 more points that I want to make. One's a fast one. This is a great time for you to support us via Patreon. You can check out the link below at patreon.com/Eternal Durdles. And then my final point is, Phil, do you remember when I talked about the difference between Asia, Europe, and North America, and what my feelings and thoughts were about those 3 places as far as deck construction was concerned?
Why don't you recap?
Yeah, so I said that I think more non-permanent based Storm combo exists in Asia. Lands is more prevalent in EU, and tempo is more prevalent in North America, and that is exactly what happened. So if we look at Asia, let's see, spell combo is 8.3% versus 9.3. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about combo total. So we're looking at about 20% in Asia. We're looking at about 20% in the EU, and then in North America, we're about 20%. But there's a little bit more Storm combo in Asia. Now, if we go over to tempo, we got 20% in Europe. We've got my dog barking in the background. We've got North America has 24%, and Asia has 22%. Relax, dude. So just a little bit more for the tempo decks in North America, but I was not incorrect.
Yeah, I had some conversations too with people after the tournament was effectively over for me, where I was talking about how I moved over into black, and that situated me a little bit better against combo. And they were saying that these were with people who had traveled to EU. They didn't go to Asia, but they traveled to Prague to compete in that Eternal weekend. And they were like, no, like when you play in North America, you're going to run into much more of the Beanstalk decks and the Delver decks. Like they were like, that was their expectation, and they said that that's more or less what lined up for them.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be pretty consistent with most of the people that I talked about that had played in both. So that's if that's the case going forward, it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be playing in the North America ones, right?
We will be playing in North America mostly, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that does it for us. Like I said, tune in. We're going to have a couple more interviews. We're going to milk this Eternal Weekend thing for as long as we can. So thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great day, and I hope you did well at Eternal Weekend. Here is a playlist of our interviews. You can check those out. They're excellent, and you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to meet a lot of the great people that help this community grow. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great one. Bye.